Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome and thank you to both of our witnesses this morning. I want to start with Ms. Palmater. I've been in this business for more than 30 years as well, and I've been called many names too. And all of our protests and challenges that posed by Aboriginal peoples in this country are always related to the economy of this country. Resource development is of course an important aspect to all of that. And the far-reaching proposed provisions in C-51 are therefore somewhat a direct threat to Section 35 rights. National Chief Bellegarde recommend that we scrap this bill. You say that this bill must be withdrawn because it's not fixable. I happen to agree with that. For 150 years in the history of this country, governments have always been adversaries to Aboriginal peoples in this country. We know that. We both know that. And what we've always considered as rights issues has always been viewed or treated as police issues, on the other hand, or law and order issues, on the other hand. Do you think by successive provincial, federal, and municipal governments, I might add, will this proposed legislation make matters worse for Indigenous peoples in this country, and why?
Thank you for your question. It's an important one because, as I stated, it doesn't just impact Indigenous peoples, it impacts the rest of Canada, environmentalists, unions, women's groups, children's advocates. We have to get real about what is the clear and present danger here. How many Canadians on Canadian soil have died from acts of terrorism? Compare that with how many thousands of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls there are. Where is the Bill C-51 to protect them? How many husbands have killed their wives? How many serial killers have we had? Yet, we're focusing on C-51. The problem is this bill isn't really about terrorism. If you do an analysis of this omnibus bill, the focus is, just as you've said, less about being anti-terrorism and more about protecting the status quo. The status quo in terms of power relations and economic relations. This new national security law focuses on threats to sovereignty, territorial integrity, diplomatic relations of all things, economic stability, critical infrastructure. All of these things are an essential part of the daily lives of Canadians and First Nations. Passing this bill for any activity, any person, any purpose that threatens national security, so defined as financial stability and territorial integrity, makes us all suspects. Canada won't even have to pass this bill. The terrorists will have won. What is terrorism? Fundamentally, it's the denial of life, liberty, and security of the person. If Canada goes ahead and takes those rights away, terrorists just have to sit back, job done. And we worked far too hard in our treaty negotiations. We worked far too hard in the development of the Charter and the Constitution and all of the international laws that protect core fundamental human rights to allow that to happen because we want to protect some corporate economic interests.
Given that your access to information request has shown that you've already been surveilled for perfectly legal civic actions, do you think that, or is it reasonable to assume, let me put it that way, that if this law is passed, if this legislation is passed, you could be viewed as a terrorist for the same lawful activities that you have?
Bill C-51, as currently written, would capture everything under Idle No More. Imagine Grand Chief Matthew Cooncombe of the Grand Council of the Crees offered a quote from my submission as well, which said that had their activities been done today as opposed to back then, there wouldn't be the negotiation of the James Bay Agreement. They would all be in jail. The Idle No More movement, which was historical coming together of First Nations and Canadians peacefully, dancing, singing, and drumming, would now all be monitored, if not already, as the media has indicated, we are clearly monitored, maybe arbitrarily detained. All of these things are very frightening for this country. And keeping in mind, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples protects us, grants us, recognizes this international customary law that we can act autonomous, that we can occupy our lands. Under the Department of National Defense's manual, occupying our lands, advocating for our autonomy, advocating for political rights is described as insurgency alongside jihadists. It is no comfort that there is a proviso saying that lawful activity, lawful dissent, lawful protest, lawful art, whatever that is, won't be captured by this bill. Because the second we do a round dance in the street without a permit, it very quickly becomes unlawful. And we have to remember, I already went over all of the very validly enacted laws that Canada has had that has killed, ended up in the killing, murders, rapes, violence, sterilizations, scalpings of our people. Those were valid laws. The only way to protect ourselves was to act unlawful in resistance. What we're saying now is that the clear and present danger to First Nations and Canadians is that the environmental destruction, the contamination of our water, and we have a right to defend our life, liberty, and security to protect our future generations. Under this bill, that will all be captured as a threat to national security and/or terrorism.